In this video, we're going to walk you through the process of replacing the cranks on a spin bike equipped with Morse tapered fittings. In order to gain access to our internal drivetrain, we're going to have to remove this main chain guard and then the internal half-moon chain guard that's surrounding the sprocket. We've gone ahead and removed our securing screws from the main chain guard. Now let's go ahead and slide it off. Easiest way to do this is make sure that your crank is set to the 8 o'clock position. Go ahead and remove your internal half-moon shaped chain guard. Now let's go ahead and remove the chain off our rear sprocket. In order to do that, we're going to have to loosen up our left and right flywheel lock nut, and thereafter we're going to have to loosen up our left and right flywheel alignment screws. With our lock nut and flywheel alignment screw loose, let's verify whether we have enough slack. If we do, carefully pull your chain inwards and verify you don't catch your finger and roll the chain off the rear sprocket. In order to remove the cranks, let's start off with our usual left side first. We're going to have to remove this center securing screw. Now that we've gone ahead and removed our center securing screw from the crank, let's find our crank removing tool, and let's make sure that we seat the nut of the tool fully into the base of the actual crank. We want to make sure we do this in order to prevent the actual nut from breaking inside the crank arm. Once you begin torquing your center screw, you will notice that your crank arm will pull off the actual bottom bracket. In doing so, we want to be careful that once we come towards the end, that we catch a dowel pin that clocks our crank arm to the axle of the bottom bracket. As we can see, that dowel pin is here. Now we're going to go and remove our usual right side crank arm using the same procedure we did for our left side. As we did with our left side, let's go ahead and try to catch that dowel pin in case it falls off. And one thing to note, in this case the dowel pin is still stuck to the crank arm. To remove the pedals off the cranks, we're going to use the same process that we used to remove the cranks off the bottom bracket axle. If you flip your crank around, you'll have the same securing screw. Let's go ahead and remove that. One thing that's different from the crank removal is that in this case you will not have a clocking dowel pin. Let's go ahead and mount our usual right side crank. First, before we go ahead and do that, we gotta make sure that we install our clocking dowel pin onto the bottom bracket axle. Let's go ahead and place it in place. Once that's on there, carefully locate the dowel pin slot on the crank and verify that you gently and smoothly mount the crank arm. Once your crank arm is mounted with a rubber mallet with medium force, go ahead and strike the center of the sprocket. In striking the crank with a rubber mallet, we ensure that our Morse taper from the bottom bracket axle to the crank locks in place. So as you can notice, even though we do not have a securing screw in place, our crank is not going anywhere. Now let's go ahead and install our specialized securing socket head. Now before we go ahead and put that in, we do want to point out that this does need to be torqued down to a specific value. And that value is 33 to 37 foot-pounds of torque. Now let's go ahead and mount our usual left side crank arm, but before we go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and mount the clocking dowel pin onto the bottom bracket axle. Once that's on, let's go ahead and mount the crank arm. Now let's go ahead and install our pedals. One thing to note is how to identify the user left and right. At this point, our bike is currently facing forward, And if you can notice, the axles on the pedals are facing inwards towards each other. One thing to note is that the cages are on top. This allows the foot to slide in. If the pedals are installed backwards, as shown here, and the cage is facing upwards, you'll notice that your foot will not be able to slide in. Mounting the pedal now, just go ahead and mount it or insert it into the Morse taper. It doesn't have to be on tight now. What we want to go and do is leave it at the bottom, and using a rubber mallet, strike it with medium force at the center of the pedal. With the pedals installed onto the crank arms, let's go and make sure that we install our securing socketed cap screw. Let's go ahead and mount the chain on our rear sprocket. Pass it over the pedals and onto the sprocket itself. Careful here not to catch your fingers. We're going to give it about a quarter turn, half a turn on the cranks until the chain links fully mount onto each one of the tooth of the sprocket itself. Let's go ahead and tighten our chain up a little bit. We're going to turn this alignment screw 3 full turns. So remember, what we do to the left, we do to the right. So let's go ahead and do those turns. Okay, now if your alignment screw locks up a little bit and you still don't have suitable tension, go ahead and loosen up your jam nut. Just bring it back further in order for you to be able to adjust that screw more. Now that we have chain tension at a suitable, what we think is a suitable tension, let's go ahead and lock up our jam nuts. Okay, so our lock nut is tight now. Now the reason why we went ahead and did that is because we wanted to find out if our chain tension changed while we were locking our nut. Now if it did, obviously it'd be too tight. It seems tight now, but let's go ahead and measure that. Okay, so our deflection value looks like we're at 0 there, and we're at our max there, which is about 1.25 inches, right under 1 1/8 inches. So our tension should be fine. Let's go ahead and check our flywheel alignment. Now because we did even turns on both our left and right alignment screws, our flywheel should be rotating evenly and not cocked at any kind of angle that's off center. Now if our alignment was off, we're going to have to go back through the whole chain retensioning process, and keep in mind that our flywheel needs to be kept in alignment with the center. Now let's go ahead and install our half moon chain guard. Now when tightening, let's remember that this is plastic and we do not want to go too tight and cause the plastic guard to break.